Welcome back to the Brilliant Balance Show. Thanks for pressing play today. We're going to talk today about a subject that is really near and dear to my heart. It's been like a refrain that I have said to clients and to myself for what feels like 100 years at this point. And that is the simple phrase, what gets scheduled gets done. And I think I have gone back and looked in the archives of the podcast to find the first time that I really talked about this subject. And it was episode 7 of this show. And so what I thought would be fun to do today, for 2 reasons, and I'll tell you what both of them are, is to re-air that original episode 7 with kind of this new introduction, just to anchor it at this moment in time. So here's why. I am living through a really fun, novel summer. Lots of things happening that are out of the ordinary. I have a child who's been living away from home for the first time this summer, who is actually moving again at the very end of August. I have my middle guy going off to college near the end of August, and I have my youngest, my baby, with a brand new driver's license, so we never see her. So lots of things have changed in our household. And it also has been a summer where I have had a lot of travel, work travel, personal travel, small, short trips broken up in different ways versus like one big family vacation. So as this episode airs, I am going to be elbow deep in moving my son into college. And as one way of taking care of myself and kind of practicing what I preach, I am going to give myself a reprieve from content creation and allow this episode to re-air. And it's so timely because it really is demonstrating a principle that I believe so deeply, and that what gets scheduled gets done sort of nestles into. Okay. So the bigger concept that this really relates to is like running your week your way. Staying in the driver's seat of your own week in terms of your schedule and your time and where you're investing that time. And there's lots of different tools and practices that I've taught people over the years about how to do that, right? How do you keep yourself in the driver's seat of your own life, really, but then in control of your own calendar? How do you make sure that the things that are making the cut on your calendar are the things that you really want there? How are you letting go of the things that you don't? And a part of that, like one little piece of that system, is this idea of scheduling the things you plan to do, not only knowing what you're going to do, but knowing when you're going to do it. And so as I was looking out at the workflow that I was going to have to take on throughout the month of August, this was a place where I already knew what was scheduled. I already knew when these podcast episodes needed to be written, developed, recorded, produced, all the kind of elements of the timeline. And I could see what was coming, which was, I'm going to have this collision course with a really full week, both physically, like I'm going to be in San Diego and, we have our hands full of all the things we're moving in, and also emotionally, right? It's going to be a big week. Can I remove some kind of cognitive burden, emotional burden from the week? And re-airing a podcast is absolutely a way for me to do that. So I like that this is like I'm demonstrating to you a technique by actually doing it, and then I'm going to teach you how to do it. And this, again, small piece of the puzzle called What Gets Scheduled Gets Done is what we're going to focus on in today's episode. You're going to hear my thinking from almost 9 years ago, right? How was I thinking about this concept? And I've re-listened to it, of course, and I would say it holds up. Right? The examples that I'm going to share will be when my kids were younger. So I think what was top of mind for me was a slightly different collection of tasks. We talk about what I think I call the advanced class of an integrated to-do list. And this is something you might have heard me talk about over the years if you've been around a while. And I think these two concepts of really being mindful of what makes it onto your calendar and also scheduling your to-do list items are really transformational for people who haven't yet adopted these practices. So lots of good stuff coming your way in this episode. And then if this piques your interest, I want you to think about joining me for the September masterclass inside the coaching circle, because we are going to go really deep on this idea of running your week your way. Right? Really having a week that works for you. And I'm going to get into the other tools in that toolkit beyond just scheduling things that really help you stay in control or in having a strong sense of agency around what you say yes to and what you say no to, and how you organize that inside of the construct of a week. I have a lot to say about why a week is the perfect unit of time. And we're going to talk about that in that class as well. So I hope that today kind of whets your appetite for that. And then I hope that you decide to join me for the actual class. I'm going to check the date. That class is happening on September 9th. The link is in the show notes. It's open to anyone who's a member of the coaching circle. So the link to join is there. That is a no commitment membership. You can join or leave at any time. So really no risk. You can think of it as buying your ticket to just that class, see how it goes, see what you think of that, and the coaching call that follows, which is really where a lot of the magic happens. We unpack what you've learned in the class and then gone and applied, and you get a chance to ask questions and get some coaching from me about that. And it happens, on a month-to-month basis. So you are welcome to come in and dip out at any time that it does not feel like it is serving your needs. All right, with that, we're going to get into today's episode. And again, you're going to learn all about what gets scheduled, gets done. I can tell you that what we're about to cover today is the single most effective thing that I do to keep my actions in line with my values and my priorities. And honestly, it's deceptively simple. But it is incredibly powerful, especially if you're someone who struggles with things just kind of falling off your radar. Like you have this idea that you're going to do something, you mean to do it, and then it somehow you forgot that was a decision you made. Have you ever had that experience where you look back at how long it's been maybe since you've done something that you do with regularity, like getting your hair cut, or visiting your sister, or maybe going to the dentist. And you think to yourself, how on earth has it been that long since the last time I went? It feels like it was just yesterday. How did that happen? Where did the time go? Didn't I just do it like 5 minutes ago? Or the other person this will be really valuable for is maybe you're somebody with an idea a minute. You have an idea and you think, yes, this is going to be great. And then 2 weeks later, you realize you've completely let that resolution or that commitment slide. Well, if either of those make sense to you, then listen up, because this definitely is designed for you today. So what I'm going to share today is a system for getting things done. And it's so simple. Really, it is so simple, but it's so often overlooked. And what I've learned is it's not hard at all. It doesn't require you to buy a single thing. It really only requires you to have clarity about what it is that you value or what it is that you want to prioritize, and some type of calendar, which could be iCal, on a Mac. It could be Google Calendar. It could be a paper planner, a wall calendar, whatever system you use, but one central calendar system. And the essence of what we're going to talk about today is that it's not enough to know what to do. You really need to know when you're going to do it for it to be effective. Okay? So the problem we're trying to solve here, again, is things falling off the radar, things you mean to do, things you want to do. So the whole process starts, step one is getting crystal clear about what you want to get done. And I would encourage you to think about both work things, whatever work looks like for you, your actual job that you get paid to do, tasks involved in running your household, volunteer work, the work that you have to get done, sort of the have-to-dos, and then also things you want to do, the fun things, the things that make life, interesting and delightful. I want you to think about a list that would encompass both of those and get very clear about what the things are that you want to create time and space for. Let's talk about a couple of examples. One of the things that I schedule is date night, having a regular time on the calendar so that it just doesn't get away from me. You might schedule girls' nights, times with one group of girlfriends that you're together with all the time, or maybe even different circles. There could be a book club group or a Bible study group or a group that you volunteer with or a group that you drink wine with, whatever it is. You might want to schedule one-on-one time with each child. This is one that a lot of women who I coach adopt, that, if we have multiple children, it's really easy to do things as a family. We tend to veer in that direction. And what is sometimes really powerful is spending one-on-one time with each child, which is harder to do if we don't have a plan for it, right? Another example of something you might want to use the system for would be self-care or health care appointments. And I do separate those two. Going to the dentist is at the lowest level of self-care, right? It's health care. It's mandatory. So scheduling those annual appointments with your physicians, with the eye doctor, the 2 times with the dentist should probably make it into the system, as well as self-care. Maybe you're somebody who really enjoys getting a pedicure regularly, or a massage, or, a facial treatment. These are things that could make it into this system. Even conversations with people that you don't seem to cross paths with by accident. So somebody like your college roommate that you love to catch up with, but they're not in your day-to-day life. So it requires a little bit more effort or intentionality. Those are all examples of the types of things that you might have on your master list, the fun things, right? So the work things that need to be done with regularity can also go onto a list like this. And that's step 1 of the process, is getting clear about what do you want to get done? What do you want to create space for? The second step of the process is where you put those things on your calendar at the desired frequency. So let's say that you want to do that girls' night once a month. The calendar, by putting it on the calendar, it serves as the reminder. You essentially book them as though they were already appointments. They're sort of a placeholder. And then when you're reviewing your calendar, you'll see that reminder, and it prompts you to actually schedule it for real. So, you might think of it as like a ghost appointment or a placeholder appointment. Maybe you use a different color on your calendar so you don't get confused, right? So you designate these. Mine says something like reminder date night. And what that does is it reminds me that if I don't have something scheduled already on about that timing, that I want to move that into an actual plan. So we start looking for, where is there a concert? What restaurant might we want to go to? Is there another activity that we might double purpose as date night, and it's close to the scheduled time, so then we can just erase the reminder and move it to the actual appointment. Other things that fit like this would be, getting a haircut. So you don't end up in that situation where you wake up one day and look in the mirror and think, what happened, right? Then you get your calendar out, and I know you've done this. I've done this. You look back at your calendar and you're like, oh my God, it's been 4 months. How did that happen? How did I forget to go? And this is a system that helps you prevent those moments. So I'll tell you, this is a true story. I have this standing date night scheduled with my husband. Sometimes we shift it around, if there's an event or a party or something that is close to our scheduled time, we lock it in there. But we were running with regularity once I put the system in, maybe every 3 to 4 weeks. And one time I just forgot to extend this out as a repeating appointment. I think I'd scheduled it as a repeating appointment, and I went out like 6 months or something. And I forgot to extend it. And I'm going to be honest, 4 months went by with no date night. Hey, rock stars, if this podcast has been speaking to you, but real life keeps getting in the way of actually doing anything differently, the Coaching Circle is your next step. It's my monthly membership, live masterclasses on the core Brilliant Balance skills, coaching calls, practical tools, and a community of women who just get it. This is where insight finally becomes action. Check it out at brilliant-balance.com/coaching circle. I'll see you inside. I swear, it was my biggest reminder that the act of having these pre-booked on the calendar was really the system that was holding me accountable and creating kind of the safety net, the underpinnings underneath this. I have regular walking dates with one of my very best friends. And the way we work it is when we finish one walk, we schedule the next one. So, sometimes we're able to do this every week, sometimes it's every 2 weeks, sometimes it stretches to 3 or 4, but we never end a walk without scheduling the next one. So we never fall out of rhythm, right? It really works perfectly for us in that system. And I have calendar reminders set up for all kinds of things that I've, given you as ideas here today. So think of that piece of the process as sort of the long-term planning application, right? You're working on an annual calendar. You're looking out for things you want to do with regularity, maybe in perpetuity, forever and ever, you want to be doing this thing, and you can just book it with no end date on your calendar. So that's the first application, because I think that so many of the women I talk to tell me there's things I just want to get to, but I never seem to get to them. I would love to do this thing, but I never seem to get to it. So shifting it from something that's a fuzzy idea that maybe someday it would be fun to do that, to something that actually has a time slot on your calendar is a very powerful shift from the general, this fuzzy, ephemeral kind of idea to the specific. It moves it into something that's more of a practical reality. Now, that's a really cool application. And honestly, if you did nothing else, you would be amazed at how much better your life feels, what the rhythm starts to feel like with just that. But there is sort of an advanced ninja trick here that I want to share with you that is about moving this same concept from the long term into the short term, into your day-to-day planning, your week-by-week planning. So here's how it works. Most of us have a to-do list. Right? I work with a lot of women on bringing order to their life, and virtually all of them, when we get started, have some kind of a to-do list. Sometimes lots of to-do lists in lots of different places, right? So we have Post-it notes and yellow legal pads, and we have the notes on our phone in the notes section, and then we have something we scribble down next to the computer. Lots and lots of lists of things that we want to get done. But what most people don't have is they don't have any sense of when they are going to do it, right? So it becomes sort of this running to-do list that we'll get to someday, or that we know we need to get to, but it doesn't have a time at which we know we are going to do it. So what you want to do for this advanced application here in the short term is you want to turn your to-do list into a schedule. This is what makes it work in your daily life. So you're going to shift from an open to-do list model to an actual chronology of the work that you'll do in any given day. And in order to do that, you have to pay some attention to how long it will take to do it. And you have to pay particular attention to leaving some breathing room in your day. Okay, this is really everything, setting the cadence for what a day looks like. So to help you kind of wrap your head around this, let's look at the weekend as an example. Lots of people start Saturday morning with kind of a list of things that need to get done that weekend. Groceries need to get bought, laundry, maybe you have to return things to Target. Maybe you want to stop into that little boutique in town to order, buy a gift for your sister. Maybe the kids have games. There's a basketball game here and a swimming meet there. Maybe you need to make brownies for a party at school. So all these things sort of go on to this big list of things that need to get done. And then you step back from it and you think, whew, that was a lot of work. And then you pour a cup of coffee, and then your husband comes down and you get into a conversation, and then somebody calls and you're in another conversation, and then your child needs something. And before you know it, half the day is gone. The list, you haven't gotten anything crossed off the list, and the time is starting to get compressed. So imagine that instead of just making this running list, what you did was you set up kind of a loose schedule for Saturday and Sunday. And you really thought through in sequence when each of those tasks were going to get done, with some attention paid to how long it was likely to take. Well, I'll tell you what would happen over time is you would start to, one, get better at estimating how long these things take, and two, you would see the efficiencies of what could be connected to what. right? If you're going to be out returning things to Target, maybe that's a good time to also stop in and buy the gift for your sister. If you're going to be making brownies, maybe you can put the laundry in, and while it's in the laundry cycle, you can actually get the brownies made. While the brownies are baking, you can fold the laundry, right? You start to see those synergies of how the day is going to unfold. And what's really powerful about that is it gives you this mental picture of your day before you live it. So then when you go through the day, when things aren't shaping up that way, you have kind of this instinctive desire to bring it back in line with the picture that you'd set in your mind, right? And it's not something you really have to even think about consciously. When you start making that list, you do just create this picture, right? When it becomes a schedule, you can imagine yourself sort of walking through that day. And I'll tell you, when I start a day, whether it's the weekend or the weekday, I really know exactly what work I'm going to get done and in what order. And that includes meetings that are on the books, and then spaces that I have intentionally protected to work on projects. Maybe something like recording this podcast. This is something that had a particular time in my day. I knew I had to have my notes together before the day started so that I could sit down and just be prepared to deliver it in the time slot that I'd allocated. And what that does, what having that plan does, is it really reduces procrastination. And it greatly improves your productivity because you know when you're starting to fall off track. You know what you'd set out to accomplish that day. And if you're not on pace, you can take some corrective action, right? You can move something to a different day, or you can try to do something in a shorter amount of time, right, to catch up. But ultimately, you know where your target is for the day because you're not just working from that running to-do list. So combined, these two things they sort of pack a 1-2 punch, right? You have this long-term plan of how you really want, think about your year to unfold, the cadence with which you want to do some activities. And then you have a short-term plan of how you want the day to unfold. And, if I just kind of see around the corners for you, let's say you decided to try this system out. One of the things that the women I work with often report is they learn that they're not particularly good at estimating how long something is going to take. And my advice is always the same. I'll give you the same advice today. Don't let that frustrate you. This is a new skill. And if you get frustrated by the fact that you thought it was going to take an hour and it took 2.5, you'll just shut down, right? You'll abandon the system before you ever get good at it. The better way through is to say, wow, that took 2.5 hours and I thought it was only going to take 1. What can I learn from that for the next time I need to do a similar task? Ultimately, what gets revealed with this is that we've been trying to cram way more things into a day than is probably realistic. And so learning, the first thing that happens when you confront that is you resist it. You feel like, well, I have to fit more into the day. And in good time, you might be able to do that by becoming more efficient. But the first realization is really that big push to something we've talked about in an earlier podcast, and that's curation. This is a big sort of spotlight shining on the way you're living your life, suggesting that maybe the answer is not, cramming 1,000 more things in more efficiently. Maybe the answer is having a more careful curation of what you're trying to create space for, being more realistic, in other words, with what you really can get done. So I'm going to recap, the things we've talked about today. The first piece is you need to have one centralized calendar for this to work. If you have a calendar at work and a calendar at home and a calendar on the wall and a calendar for the kids, you're going to struggle. Okay, so one centralized calendar that pulls your life into one place is the first piece. And then you need a long-term strategy, right? The long-term strategy is, what is that list of things that you want to do regularly? And get those on the calendar essentially as reminders, right? With a specific frequency so that you can be very intentional about making them happen. You're going to be amazed at how great you feel when you actually got your hair cut and highlighted every 2 months like you said you were going to do. Right? Or when you really did get to the end of the year and everyone in your family hit their dentist and doctor's appointments right on schedule. This system is what's going to help you do that. And then the next piece, once you've kind of laid that in, is you want to apply the same principle to the short term. right? You want to take that running to-do list and turn it into a schedule. And that means you want to block that specific time in the day for each thing on the list so that you're sort of moving through the day with visibility to how it's going to unfold. So here's the cool thing. If you can make this shift, your life is going to fall in line with your priorities, right? You'll be intentionally scheduling in the most important things first and letting the small things fall in around them where they really belong. It's going to bring your intentions in line with your actions, in other words. And that's really where we tend to feel deep satisfaction. When we say, this is what I'm going to do, this is the commitment I'm making to myself, this is the priority I'm declaring, and then we actually do it. There's deep satisfaction in that. So I'm excited to hear from you what your experiences are with this when you implement, okay? But I want to warn you, there's one big risk to becoming super productive using this strategy. And that is that you will 100% want to cram even more into your week. And I'm going to encourage you not to do that, because in the next episode, I want to talk about the very real risks of trying to do it all. Okay. It is, I believe, a cultural epidemic, especially for high achieving women. This is our badge of honor. It's the holy grail. She who gets the most done wins, right? Or so we're told. And so I want to dig into that together next week and really challenge the belief that getting more done is the answer. So we're going to talk about that. And so before you fall into that trap, I want you to just protect yourself from trying to cram even more into your week using this system. Okay. And that's it for today. You know, this is something that you can take right away and implement into the way today unfolds or tomorrow unfolds in your life. And you can spend a little bit of reflective time thinking about what are those tasks that you want to allocate into the upcoming months. So thanks for listening, and especially thanks for implementing. I love hearing these stories about the things you're trying based on what you've heard in the podcast. So make sure you're subscribed so you get next week's episode. And if you're enjoying the show, the best way to tell me that is to take 10 seconds to rate it and leave a review. We have a ton of those already, and I love reading every single one of them. In fact, we might start reading a few of them in these episodes. So to do that, you just go to the show homepage, you scroll down a little bit beyond all the episodes that are listed, and you'll see an area where you can just click the number of stars that you want to use to rate the show and to leave a few comments about what you've thought. And I would really look forward to reading them. So till next time, go be brilliant.